You can make sure that I'm recording this meeting. All right, so today we're going to start with your new section, which is called Fusion Planning and Deployment. And so FusionAccess, as we've spoken about it, FusionAccess is a platform. Is just a desktop solution, cloud solution that can virtualize user desktops and application, delivering them securely from the data center to various client devices. So we can basically be able to access certain data. So you basically virtualize your organization or things like that, and you can have access to the data or to the computers from a distance. So with that being said, proper planning and deployment ensure a high performance and the scalability as well, and the reliability of the virtual desktop infrastructure itself, or VDI. VDI, which stands for virtual desktop infrastructure. So we need a good planning phase, okay, because an effective planning would ensure that the resources such as your network design and user requirements are fully aligned before the deployment. So we need to look at certain requirements like the user type identification, right? So the users can be maybe office users or graphic users, or tasks that involve some graphics, can be task-based users. And then we look at different application scenarios. Are we trying to have a secure office or public desktop or private desktop, in a sense? So those are the kind of requirement analysis. And then we also look at the system scale estimation. So the number of concurrent users, how many users are we going to be using at the same time? The type of desktops, is it GPUs enabled, or the storage capacity, the network bandwidth? So all those information are very important when we are planning for the system scale estimation. And then we also look at the network planning. So in terms of the network, are we going to use a logical and physical isolation, like the intranet and extranet separations? Are we going to use VLAN or any other configuration that we're going to use? So it's very important to plan that. We also do a resource planning, which means that we're looking in terms of the computing, the numbers of servers that we're going to be using, that the storage, the network, the security. And then from that phase, the planning phase, we now can go to the deployment phase. So after planning, FusionAccess components are deployed in layers to ensure that we have a smooth integration and performance. So basically, we're going to look at the virtualization layer, which means that we're going to use FusionCompute to make sure that we have virtual machine. We can create virtual machines and the whole resource management. And then we look at the management layer where we're going to have to use Fusion Manager. So Fusion Manager to just try and monitor or control all the resource scheduling, right? And then we have access layer. On the access layer, that's where we're going to use FusionAccess. So all these components, we spoke about them already. So we're going to use FusionAccess, which will provide desktop deliveries and the whole connection. Okay, and then we have protocol layers. On the protocol layers level, we're going to have the HTTP, which is the Huawei desktop protocol, which will handle the display, the audio, the videos, and all the peripheral transmission, right? And then on the client layer, we're going to have thin clients, mobile clients, or PCs. These are just the end user access devices. And then from there, now we can go to the deployment model and see what type of deployment we're going to have All right, so that's how the whole planning and deployment is going to be. So, so with that, we're going to have different type of deployment. So we have we can have all-in-one deployment. We can have a standard deployment or a UNS deployment. So with an all-in-one deployment, it means we have all components. So in this case, we have all components. So the all-in-one deployment, we have a user capacity of less than 500. So Huawei FusionAccess will offer several deployment schemes to just accommodate different user scale, network environment, and service requirements. So choosing the right deployment mode will ensure that we have an optimal performance and a simplified management and scalability. So when we think of the first one, which is the all-in-one, in this case, we have all components that are deployed on the same virtual machine. So so that's how this is going to work. So the user quantity for this type of case is fewer than 500. So we have like less than 500 users. The access type, we can use an intranet users only. So this is the main focus of this course, actually, the all-in-one deployment. All right. So all-in-one deployment will just integrate all the majors FusionAccess components into a single physical server or small clusters, right? So this is the ideal. It's ideal for small or medium-sized organization that can require secure access within just a local network, right? So in this case, we have all the components such as your FusionCompute, Fusion Manager, and FusionAccess. They are deployed together, right? So these components are deployed together. We have a simple installation and maintenance, low costs, and this is suitable for training environment, small enterprise offices. So there's no need for public network access. So only internal LAN users can connect to this. To this type of deployment, right? So there's a few advantages with this. It's just that we have a quick deployment, lower investment. All right. So this is the all-in-one deployment where we're going to have in dual deployment mode, the two active and standby virtual machines must be deployed on different CNAs. That's one thing to note here. Right, and then we have the standard deployment. So the standard deployment, so this is for the user quantity of 500 to 10,000. Okay, so in this mode, FusionAccess components are deployed separately across multiple servers or virtual machines to just improve the performance and the scalability as well. So this model will support medium to large enterprises that are requiring maybe a higher reliability or more users. So we're going to have, with this, we have a kind of a distributed deployment of FusionCompute, Fusion Manager, and FusionAccess. This is suitable for production environment with like hundreds or thousands of users. We can integrate with what we call AD, which is the active directories. I think active directories. We have DNS that can be integrated in this. This is just for us to be able to have a high scalability and performance. Okay. But the limitation with this will be we will need more what you call this it requires more hardware and configuration. It has more, the deployment would be more complex. All right. So, all right. So this is, and then we have the last one, which is the unified name service, which is the UNS deployment. So that's the third. Okay, so you need to note whenever we have users, when you have like less than 500 users, maybe in a lab or small office, we can look at an all-in-one deployment method. When we have users from 500 to 10,000 in a medium-large enterprise, we can use the standard deployment. And then when we have more than 10,000 in a large-scale organization, we can use the UNS deployment. Right. So the all-in-one infrastructure. So in the all-in-one architecture, we have like in terms of operating system, you can have a OS 2.8 64 bits, or you can select the LR 2.5. All right, so these are certain specifications that we can have there. And then we have the standard as well with its own specification. Okay, so, and we have a network plane and a component deployment plane. So in this case, now we're talking about a port group for management plane of the network interface card of architecture VM, the virtual machines. So in this case now, you need to note that in FusionAccess, especially all-in-one deployment, different networks planes, such as your management plane, service plane, and storage plane, can either share the same network segment or be separated into different ones. So this depends on the scale and the security requirements of the system. So, so in this case, when we think of the service plane and the management plane, this plane will belong to the same network segment. All right. So in terms of, so we're going to have if the service plane and the management plane belong to the same network segment, you will be advised to just create a port group for the service plane. Okay, so that means that both planes use the same IP subnet for communication between infrastructures components. For example, between FusionCompute, Fusion Manager, and FusionAccess. So they will be using the same. So in terms of the configuration, we recommend that you create a port group for the service plane NICs. The NICs are the network interface card on the management DFS, which means that on the management distributed virtual switch, that's the DFS. So these setups will help simplify the network configuration and just enhance that manageability, since both planes use a unified distributed virtual switch or DVS, right? All right, so these the following uses the following figure. We just used the all-in-one deployment of FusionCompute. So this is an example of this plane. Okay, so you need to understand that the management DVS, the distributed virtual switch for management already handled management traffic. So since the service plane is in the same network segment as the management plane, so its NICs can safely be, we have the service here, we have the managed day. So the NICs can be can safely use the same DFS. We're using the same DVS, the same DVS. So this will avoid all unnecessary complexities such as additional DVS, additional VLAN. So it ensures that we have a stable and strong communication between the infrastructure of virtual machines. So, all right. So this is how this is going to work. So, and then we have the second one, the second architecture that we have. Okay, in the first one, that was a case where the service plan and the management plan belong to the same network. But if the management plan and the service plan belong to different network segments, so that becomes a different case. So now in this case, the management plan and the service plan are on different network segments or subnets. So that means that the IP address used for system management. So remember, system management, you have components such as the Fusion Manager on your platform. So the component, the Fusion Manager, is using a different IP. So your Fusion Manager using a different IP from those that's the IP that are used to deliver the desktop services, like the user sessions, like HTTP traffics. So now you are having different IP addresses being used there. So the recommendation here is to create a port group for service plan NICs on the service DVS. All right, not on the management DVS. So now we're gonna create a service group on the service DVS. So in this case, we can create a group for the service plan NICs on the service DVS to ensure that the management traffic and service traffic are isolated from each other. So each type of traffic has its own DVS, which will improve the security and the performance as well. So in this case, in all in one deployment of FusionAccess components, so the management plan, like for system configuration, control, and maintenance, will communicate through the management DVS. All right, and then the service plan for like the user desktop access, the display, the data transmission. So this is going to use a separate service DVS. So which means that the infrastructure, virtual machines such as the connection broker, the license server, and all of these infrastructure that participate in the desktop delivery must have a service NIC connected to a port group on the service DVS. So that's what will happen with the other components such as your DNS, and then they'll all connect to the service DVS, right? Okay, so this will enable them to handle like all the authentication, user session, and different traffic, which will be independent from the management DVS. All right, so this is but the advantage of this architecture is that we're going to have like a network isolation, which will prevent interference between management operations and user traffic, user desktop traffic. We have an improved security, which means the service traffic, which has the user sessions, cannot affect or access management plan components. And then we have a better performance because each plan has its own dedicated bandwidth, which will reduce the latency and congestion of the system. And then we have a simplified troubleshooting. Okay, so and then the third one will be when the service plan and the management plan belong to the same network segment. That's where you are advised to create a port group for service plan NICs and management DVS. So this is what we have. So in this case, when we have this configuration here now, we have the same on the same network, but the difference with the first case is that in the first case, we were dealing with the all-in-one deployment. So which means that on the all-in-one deployment, we have less users, so we only have less than 500. Now, in this case, we are using this architecture on the standard deployment. So we are using it on the standard deployment. And on the standard deployment, we have more users, like between 500 to 10,000 users. And this will focus on how to handle the service plan connectivity for the virtual machine. Okay, so in this scenario, the service plan and the management plan are on the same network segment. This means that the same IP network is used for both management communication, for example, for your system control configuration and monitoring, and service communications for like user desktop access or HTTP session. So in this case, there's no need to separate routing or VLAN segmentation between the planes. So you can just create a group of service NICs on the management TVS. So the reason is because since both planes share the same network, it's really simpler to use the management DVS for both the management and the service communication. So this will avoid all unnecessary like complexity in the virtual network configuration itself. So yeah, so all right. So now, in another case of the standards deployments, when the service plan and the management plan are on different networks. So in this case of a standard deployment, the management and the service plan belong to different network segments. This means that the management plan can handle the all the system control and configuration. The service plan will handle the user desktop session traffic and HTTP and all those things. So each plan operates on its own logical and physical network. So this is used because of security. You know, we have service DVS, management DVS, so there's no contact. So this is good for security, for the performance, and then for traffic management reasons. So the recommendation here is to create a port group for the service plan NICs on the service DVS. Okay, so now in this case, because the service plan is on a separate network, it should be connected to its own dedicated distributed virtual switch, which is the service DVS. So in this case, we're going to have this type of architecture. All right. So, and then let's talk about Windows AD. Windows AD. This is just a directory service. All right. So ADs, active ADs stand for Active Directory, and Active Directory will store the network resource information for queries and usage. So such information will include things like your user account, computer information, printer information. So basically, Active Directory is just a directory service which is developed by Microsoft. That's why we're calling it Windows AD, because it's developed by Microsoft. So it's just a directory service which is developed by Microsoft to just store and manage the information about the network resources, such as your user accounts, your computer information, printer information. So shared folders, what else? Applications. So this will just enable centralized management for security and organization of all the resources in a Windows Server domain environment. So when we're looking at that, we understand that the main purpose is just to provide that centralized and secure way to just manage the users, the computers, and services across the network. So, the content of an AD directory. So the Active Directory will store various objects, right? So it's going to store various objects. So like your user account. So the user account will be, for example, your login names, passwords, the permission to access certain files, and then you have your groups. And then you have your groups. You have groups, which means that these can be a department or project team, right? And then after groups, you have your printers, you have shared directory, which means file sharing locations. You have your other object as well. You have other objects such as your what you call this organization units, or we also call them OU. So the OU are just the logical groups of objects like departments. All right. So all right. So and then we have a smallest management unit of an AD. So the smallest management unit of an AD is called an object. That is just an object. So an AD object, which is just the smallest management unit, which is the object. So in Windows, you need to note that in Windows Active Directory or Windows HD, everything is represented as an object. So, which is the smallest management unit in AD. So each object consists of a set of attributes that describe it, right? So each object is described by certain attributes, such as, for example, we have maybe the user object. So, for example, a user object will include attributes such as maybe the username, the password, the email. So all those information will now represent a user object. Okay, so objects in AD are in AD, objects will be organized in tree structure, so which form the whole domain hierarchy. So the hierarchy will allow administrators to structure resources logically in understand, like similar to a file system. So in this case, we're going to have like different type of AD object, where we're going to have things like the DC, the domain controllers. So your domain controllers will basically be like a server that will store a copy of Active Directory database. Okay. All right. So we have your default account group, which will store in-house account groups. You have user, obviously, store user objects, and then we have computers that stores computers objects added to the network domain. All right. So the computer objects are basically the computer object store. So this basically represents a computer system that join the AD's domain. So this is just used for applying all the group policies object and just managing the security setting. Yeah. All right. So in terms of the account that we have in this case, we have accounts such as administrators. The administrators will have a full control of the domain itself, and then you have the users who have like a standard user access, and then you have backup operators. That's the users that have the rights to backup or restore files. All right. All right. So um, the domain controller. So a domain controller is just when you talk about uh, the domain controller, we need to know that the directory data of an AD is stored in the domain controller. So the domain controller would basically be the core server in an active directory environment. So this is responsible for storing and managing the directory data of the AD domain service. All right. So um, uh, there can be multiple domain controllers in a domain, and each are equally important. So data is synchronized between the domain controllers so that each domain controller store a copy of the same HD database. So that means that the directory data is stored on the domain controller, and then a domain can have one or more domain controllers, all equally important, and then each domain controller holds a complete copy of the AD database, including the users, computers, groups, and other objects. All right, and then we can have a data synchronization in that because um, all domain controllers within the same domain synchronize data automatically. Okay, so all the domain controllers within the same domain synchronize data automatically. So when changes occur on one domain controller, example, a new user is created or a password is changed. So those changes will just replicate to all the domain controllers. So this will just ensure that we have a consistency and and a fault tolerance. All right, so that's how things are. And then when we're creating a domain user, so we need to know that a domain user, so domain user accounts are created on the domain controller. So this account is only credential needed for domain access. And it's also stored on the AD database of the domain. So now, as I said, like the domain user account is just the centralized user identity, right? Which is created and managed on a domain controller within an Active Directory domain. So this will allow a user to access all the resources across the entire domain using just a single set of login credentials. So um, just know that that domain user will just represent an individual user within the domain itself, and and information about this individual or this user, information such as the username, password, group group membership, profile setting, access permission, and all those information. Okay, so the way the authentication process will happen, because the domain controller need to authenticate this user, and the way the authentication will happen is that when a user logs in to any computer that is part of the domain, then they enter the domain username and password, and then the login request is sent to the domain controller, and then the domain controller verifies the credential using the Active Directory database. And if authentication succeeds, then the user is granted access based on their permission and group membership. All right, so that's what we have there. So there is common operation that can happen on a domain account, right? So a domain account can have a few operations. So in Active Directory domain, the domain user accounts are managed through various administrative operations, So these operations can help control the access, enforce the policies, and just maintain the whole organizational structure. So we can like add to group. So when we talk about add to group is when we assign a user account to one or more security or distribution group. We can so which means that we grant the user permission and access right associated with that group. This will help us just simplify the whole management by just applying group level policies instead of individual configuration and that. So, okay, so for example, an example you can have there is you are in your organization, and then you create, you take the user, maybe there is one user, maybe one user called Samkelo. So you take Samkelo to the finance security group just to give access to financial shared folders. So other users may not have access to financial folders, but Samkelo is going to have access to those files because she's part of that group. All right, so you can have that option to add a user to the group, or you can disable an account. So to disable an account, that means you temporarily prevent a user from logging in without deleting the account. So the user cannot access the domain resources, and then all account settings like group membership and permission are preserved. But like the user is not deleted completely, but you just prevent the user from using the system. So that can work when, let's say, an employee is on leave or suspended, so they cannot access the company's or the organization data or access and take folders, So that's very important. Because they are on leave, you want to stop them from working or from accessing. So we don't want to delete them completely. You don't want to remove them completely from the system. All right, guys. So this is what you see. So this is, for example, you are logged in on your computer from home, but you are accessing the virtual computer from your the company you're working for, which can be maybe in Mauritius. That is what we're talking about here. All right, so you can have disable accounts. You can reset passwords. So reset passwords, that means you're changing obviously the user's passwords in Active Directory. So this is just to ensure that the account security, if a password is forgotten or compromised, the user may be required to change the password at the next login. So that is just optional. So this will help us in case where you have like a security breach, or you want to do an account recovery, or you want to bring in a new employee, for example. So we can do a reset password, and then the other operation is the move. A move means you relocate a user account or object to another organization unit or OU. Yeah. So this is the case where the user will inherit like group policies object and permission from the new organization units. So if the user has moved from the finance department to maybe HR department, you don't want them to access finance data anymore, then you can just move that user from finance to HR. After that departmental transfer there. So you're moving and then they can have access to different type of data. All right. And then the next one is the delete, where you can permanently remove the user account from the Active Directory. You completely remove the user. So they can no longer have access to the system. So in that case, if they try to access all domain resources, they would show that the access has been revoked. So this is in the case where one of your employee has resigned or they don't work for the company anymore. Yeah. And then the last operation will be the rename. So in that case, you can change the username or display name of an account in the Active Directory. All right. All right. So we can create the we can also create, okay, these are just the user groups. Okay, we already talked about this, creating a user group. Okay, you can also create an OU, which is an organization unit in Active Directory. So an organization unit is just a container object in Active Directories. This is just used to kind of organize and manage other objects, right? Such as users, groups, and computers. So this is the organization unit that it's helping out to do that. So there's a few rules when it comes to creating an organization unit, an OU. So you cannot create an OU in common containers. So common containers will include like building Active Directories containers like users, computers. So you cannot be logged in, or you cannot be under user. Under user, you want to create organization unit. No, the organization unit has to be above everything. So you can't create it inside a container. All right. So organization user cannot reside inside these default containers, such as the users, the computer, and them. So and then common containers and OUs are at the same level. So OUs and common containers exist side by side in the domain. Okay, so they do not contain each other. So OUs can only be created in domain or other OUs. So OUs must be placed directly under a domain or under another OU. So in this case, for example, we are under another OU. We can create a new one and organization unit. All right. Okay, so one of the benefits of using OUs is that we can simplify the management of like large numbers of objects, and we can delegate administrative control without affecting the whole domain there, right? All right, so and it can also represent the whole organization hierarchy, for just easier tracking and auditing. to just see which department is under which department. Understand? So depending on how big the organization is, and then we can from there we can have that. Okay. So some similarities. We have some similarities between the user groups and the organization units. So OUs and user groups they are all AD objects. Okay, Active Directory objects. And then the difference is that a user group can contain only accounts. So a user group can contain only accounts. Okay, but an organization unit can contain accounts, computers, printers, and shared folders. And then an organization unit have group policies functions. Okay, so similarities between domain and OUs. So OUs and domain are AD logical structures, and then both OUs and domain are the management units of users, computers, and then they contain AD objects and configure group policies. Now, the difference is that the users can log into a domain, but not an OU. So domains are created before OUs, and then OUs can exist in domain, but domain cannot exist in OU. And then a domain is a higher level than OU. Okay, so to add a computer to an Active Directory domain, so this is just the process there. So we have an AD there. So this is the host where we have the virtual machine. And then from the computer where you are, you can basically log in. Okay, so log in to the virtual machine, and then if the credentials are correct, then we can actually authenticate based on the domain information, and then we can also access that and be part of that organization. All right, guys. This will be all for this session for today, and we have another session in 15 minutes where we're gonna talk about the exam. All right, guys. I will see you in the next session.